You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Whoop, whoop. Welcome back to the Shoe In Show, folks. Thanks for joining us. This season or this era that we're in terms of supply chain is like a never-ending, chaotic, I won't say a mess. I could say mess, but it's a challenge. I guess a challenge is a nice way to say it, Matt, of how we're looking at different things and the churn and the cost and then and the environment. And I think that, when we started, a couple of years ago, we were always laughing because it was like no CEO had really talked to the supply chain person in a couple of years. And all of a sudden they're like hovering over their desk daily, asking questions about the cost and where the product is. And they became like their best friend or worst enemy. Either way they want to see it. But, FDRA focuses a lot on whatever the challenges the industry is, but it's been supply chain and sourcing for a long time. And we've had every week we have a conversation with our members. We do a lot of events. And one of our partners, a long-term partner, who supports us and attends these events and speaks at these events, we have them on today, and I'm really excited to highlight them because they're a critical part of our industry, and in some ways maybe a hidden part in the box. So you want to tee up who we got today?
Yeah, man. I think we're in a breath-catching exercise on the supply chain side, and our guest has a ton of experience, not just in what's in the box, but how the box gets to our retail shelves. And that's Mike Hanrahan, who's a senior vice president at Superdry International Americas. Mike, you're a longtime friend, listener, advocate, participant, speaker, FDRA, fan extraordinaire, and the feeling is mutual, my friend. Welcome to Shoe In Show. I was just looking you up on our website. We've been doing this over 7 years. You've never been on, which shocks me because I can't remember who all has been on over these many years. But we are so excited that, late is now is better than ever. So welcome to Shoe In Show, my friend, and look forward to connecting with you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. And I must say, Matt and Andy, I have learned so much by just being a member of your organization. As you know, I'm rather peripherally involved as a vendor supplying desiccant and anti-mold products. But I've learned so much about your industry, about the footwear industry, about the textile industry. That alone is very much worth the membership.
That's awesome. We appreciate that plug. Tell your friends. We're going to record that. We're going to take that snippet and blast it out specifically. Now, Mike, I was driving through the port of LA Long Beach just the other day. I literally was. It's not like Hollywood speak. And
that's good. They're on strike, so that we would catch you right away in the lie. The AI would have caught you far sooner.
Right, exactly. So if you had wind the clocks back a year or two, I was telling my kids this because we were on a family trip, and I was explaining to them how it's pretty quiet right now relative to a year or two ago. Ships were sitting on the water, and containers were delayed. There was a ton of backup. Product was sitting in hot containers for way longer than expected. That's where you guys come in, right? Talk to us about what life was like at Superdry at that moment, and then what you're seeing relative to the marketplace now and your customers and how they're dealing with maybe some of the slowdown in the supply chain, if you will, or some of the slowdown in demand, but what that means for product and its interaction with mold and moisture.
Well, I think we're pretty much seeing what our customers are seeing pretty much exactly. We are now back to 2021 levels in terms of sales and product placement. 2022 was an incredible year. We went up about 40%, and I think that a lot of your customers and retailers experience the same thing. And unfortunately, it's not forever. It went back down to probably more sustainable and reasonable levels. But we're quite happy with our performance, and we have a very, very steady group of customers, very loyal customers. But pretty much every time I read about the economy and the market and its effect on retailers, I think we're all pretty much in the same boat, both the retailers, both the importers, and people who serve them. You know, good year 2021, a little bit of an increase over 2020. 2022 in terms of volume was fantastic, and then a decline, which compared to 2022 looks fairly drastic. But in terms of the real comparison, which is 2021 versus 2023, about the same.
Yeah, those you nail the market dynamics. I keep telling people, I've been saying this quite a bit, that it emotionally feels like some kind of recessionary activity is taking place, but it's still going to be a record year relative to the typical year. Last year was such an anomaly. When the U.S. government dumps $2 trillion into economy and gooses the consumer like it did, that's just going to be off the charts. Nothing we'll ever see again. And you kind of hope, you literally hope, because we don't see it again because it was driven by a pandemic and stimulus. But you're right. I think we're now in a more sustainable environment, and that allows for companies to no longer chase products, but be more strategic and thoughtful. And so if you're looking at 23 and you're heading into 24 and 25, and we think demand will be relatively flat, but still, pretty strong, how are you advising your customers to plan for that? How are you telling them to kind of emotionally digest what 22 looked like, and then what plans should be moving forward relative to where we're sourcing from? Because we're still sourcing from the same three countries, Vietnam, Indonesia, our top three suppliers, shifted around containers from one to the next, if you will. But it's still coming from the same three countries. So still kind of the environments are still the same. These are hot places. These are moist places. They're humid places. So talk to us about how you're advising and strategically advising your customers right now.
Well, I wouldn't presume to advise my customers, who are much more sophisticated than I am with regard to retail matters and matters of importation.
Sure.
But I think that what we're seeing perhaps is, misery loves company if you're comparing yourself to 2022. It seems to be everybody is in the same boat, but that boat is still afloat, very much so. With regard to changes in origin, again, we're mirroring what the general shift in sourcing is. We're seeing business shift from China, although China is still by far the majority of our sales. We have a factory in China, we have a factory in Thailand, we have a factory in India, and we have a factory in Indonesia. We're seeing more purchases, particularly in Vietnam and Bangladesh, places like that. So that seems to be the major shift. Little bit from Malaysia, more so from Thailand. But I think it's obviously, again, not telling anybody anything they don't already know a year ago. It's been shifting away from China to a certain extent and going to Vietnam. We recently reduced our prices from Vietnam because of a lot of basically internal factors in terms of our production facilities becoming more and more automated. So we've passed those efficiencies along. We did the same thing in China back at the end or the beginning of June. We have a one price policy, so everybody gets the same price. I've had people saying, "Can you lower the price?" And they're looking for a price sheet from 60 years ago, and we've lowered the price 3 times since, and they've been getting it. So, so I guess we are sort of mirroring what the retailers and importers are experiencing.
That's interesting. I think it's interesting you have a one rate policy, and I think that's important for people to hear. Also, that you're automating facilities and it's cheaper than ever before, and there's still some opportunities there to because obviously when you're importing 2.5 billion pairs of shoes and you have to have packets in there to protect against mold, moisture, etc. Like that's it adds up quickly as you look at your all the different facets of your costing sheets. Michael, in particular, I know inventory levels have been stacking up a lot in different warehouses, probably longer than we anticipated. Some of those are in Asia, some of those are here. Does that mean that people need to put more packets in their boxes than ever before? Does it mean they need to think about that in particular or I guess I'm just asking, like, what's the policy right now if you we're having a shoebox that you expected to be in the consumer's hands within
Mm-hmm.
180 days, and now it's looking at 240 days, the extension of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that mean for making sure your shoes are protected during that extra time frame?
It's an excellent question, and I wish I could say there is a definitive answer, but it largely depends on how the shoes and any goods are packed. If a desiccant is placed inside, and I'm talking about the correct desiccant with the correct ingredient, that's extremely important. We'll get to that in a minute, I'm sure. But if it's packaged correctly, where outside air cannot enter the environment where the goods are located, either the shoe or the garment or whatever, it may not be necessary to add an additional desiccant. The purpose of any desiccant is to lower the dew point, very simply, because a container is very much conducive to, in terms of the fact that it raises and lowers temperature fairly continuously. It's very creative or inducive, a catalyst for condensate moisture, and that's where you get the main supply chain induced moisture damage and mold. If your goods are packaged where they're too wet, there's not too many desiccants, there's no desiccant, then it's going to dry them out. That's a big misconception. What we're trying to do in a properly dried desiccant is to maintain the a humidity level below the dew point. In other words, to take moisture out of the air. To assist that, of course, it really helps to isolate your footwear or your textile or whatever you're shipping. So if that's the case, if you can isolate completely with a poly bag, or maybe the shoes are wrapped in a poly bag inside the box, for example, you may not have to use a additional desiccant. We advise our customers, if they can avoid it, not to store goods in ocean containers. Because I said ocean containers are the worst storage vehicle possible, simply because they're a metal box that can fluctuate from 50 degrees Celsius down to 20 degrees Celsius in a day. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just a formula for condensate moisture. But if nothing's perfect. The footwear industry it has an advantage in that they're moving in a shoebox generally about 7,000 per container. That is fairly efficient, not completely efficient, in isolating the ambient air outside the cargo environment. If you could put your footwear in a poly bag, let's say, that would be even better with the desiccant inside. Then you're completely allowing the desiccant to control that microclimate. But generally, if somebody is shipping and if they're expecting a very extended, we have guidelines for what we call extended storage, long-term storage. But it's easy. Throw another satchel in. In terms of the desiccant most used for the footwear people, we're talking something on the order of, I think it's 1.2 cents from China. So you throw another one in. It's fairly inexpensive. Okay. Unit cost is very low.
Let me ask you about the ingredients, because I know, in the past we've had you speak and you've talked specifically about the sustainability story and everybody's talking about sustainability and making sure their product is sustainable and more sustainable, but equally like looking at packaging and looking at even, you were looking at desiccants and trying to break out those ingredients. Maybe you can quickly tell us about those ingredients and the importance of those, because I think people may not even think about, mold prevention products and the sustainability side of that. So maybe you can share really quickly that kind of side.
Yeah, well, basically you have to remember what the purpose of a desiccant or any mold prevention or moisture damage prevention product is. You have to absorb moisture, and a lot of moisture, over time. That's important. Equally important is to isolate the moisture you captured so it doesn't get back into the cargo environment. Unless you're doing both of those things, you're wasting your money. You may as well not use anything. We've experimented over our 20 years in business with all sorts of ingredients. We only make desiccant for international supply chain operations, for nothing else. We're all old steamship geeks, including myself, in the container shipping business. We found that the best ingredient is a combination of calcium chloride, which in its raw form can absorb 700% of its dry weight, and we use food-grade tapioca starch to act as a buffer. That reduces the total absorption rate to about, depending on the size, from 500 down to about, 300% of its dry weight. If you're using others, a clay is a very popular ingredient. Silica gel is a very popular ingredient. The problem with those ingredients are twofold. They absorb very little, generally 35% of the dry weight. In a 2 or a 5 gram package, that's virtually nothing. And the saturation level is hit within 5 days. Now, I've seen some advertising saying that it absorbs faster, and therefore it's a better product. Well, it gets to its saturation point faster, but actually, the only thing you should be looking at is how much water vapor do you collect in a given period of time. And for example, in the tests we've done independent tests, and we have done tests on our own R&D facilities. Within 5 days, both silica gel and clay is saturated. It doesn't absorb anything more. And it's about, as I said, 30 to 35%. The amount of water vapor it captures is 1/4 the amount of water vapor that the proper ingredient, what we use anyway, is, as I said, calcium chloride captures. So in 5 days, our product and other products using calcium chloride absorb 4 times the actual water vapor, amount of water vapor, and it isolates it too. The packaging is equally important. Now, unless you have a supply chain period of 5 days, it's not even in the container yet. It may be packaged, hopefully, but it's not in the container. So you're missing the advantage of the curative effect of a desiccant even before it's put in the container, which is the catalyst for most moisture damage. So again, you also have to look at, are you isolating the moisture you capture? Some people, for environmental reasons, saying, "Oh, we just use paper, nothing more." Well, that's wonderful, but in our view, if you're using a product that only can absorb 35% moisture, it's saturated within 5 days, and it doesn't isolate the moisture it captures. It outgasses, and we've seen this in our tests. It outgasses back into the environment. You may as well use nothing. You're paying for, absolutely no protection.
Yeah. Well, the beauty is you don't have to be a expert in chemistry to figure all this out, because you guys partner and understand. You do the testing, right? You understand the best approaches, and you understand, based on where we're sourcing from,
yes,
what is the most effective use to ensure that, and as you said, nothing's perfect, but to mitigate the risk of moisture impact on product, which is a huge issue, because the last thing you want to do is to have to send it somewhere to be reclaimed or to be refurbished based on the conditions of something that you could have controlled, and not using paper, but using a desiccant and using Superdry to make sure that your product stays as dry as possible.
Well, there are excellent remediation companies, some of which are members of the FDRA, and I know some of them. They do a great job.
Yeah.
But I did a study once on both textiles and footwear. And if you have a container of footwear, again, basically 7,000 boxes of footwear, and you could have, on what you spend on remediation at $5 a pair, which is generally below, not including your opportunity cost, not including transportation, you could have protected something on the order of 250 containers. If you go to textiles, which I know a lot of your members import, and some of the textiles can't be remediated from moisture damage. You're talking like 4,000 containers you could have protected for your first cost of the textiles. So it's pretty cheap insurance, we think. To answer your other question or your observation, Matt, we have our own R&D facilities. We do our own testing, but also we hire a lot of people to do independent tests, some of which are members of the FDRA. because I think customers probably rely on an independent test with a little more surety than they may a test that we do, even though, we try to be very, very objective.
Awesome. Well, sounds like Super Dryers is the airborne to your supply chain cold. It's preventative. Take it daily. Get your vitamin C. It's better than having to go to the doctor and pay that copay and then pay for the pills afterwards and the pain that you might experience.
Our logo is prevention is better than, or cure is better than prevention. Prevention is better than cure. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah,
I will say Michael's going to be out at Portland with us again this year for the Logistics Summit. They are sponsoring our lunch this year, so I'm excited about that, and I know it'll be a good spread. And he'll also be speaking more about these issues and issues that they see in the supply chain. They have it. I always see their packages with Costco. Huge business with Costco. Growing business with footwear. So I encourage folks out there, as you're listening to this, call up Michael and talk to him about what you're dealing with and what you're seeing and possibilities to partner with them to better protect your product, because it's a proven, trusted way to prevent that cold, that supply chain cold down the line, and keep the mold out. So Michael, again, appreciate all your many years of participation and support. And looking forward to seeing you again and spending some time again soon in a couple of weeks in Portland.
Very much looking forward to meeting everybody in Portland again.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mike.
Folks, as always, the Shoe and Show, it's a footwear industries podcast. You can check us out at shoeandshow.com and see the entire catalog of all our shows. Drop us a line if you want us to discuss a specific topic. If there's a speaker out there that you think we should have on and grill to the hilt about what's happening and kind of share that out. Let us know that too, because we do feel like this is the industry's podcast and we want to be producing and talking about things you want to hear about. So just drop us a line. And again, we're running 2 big events in Portland coming up in a couple of weeks. The Sustainability Summit, the Brews and Shoes networking party, and then the next day, the Logistics Summit. You can keep up with all events. So if the date's already passed and you're listening to this in the future, you can go to fdra.org and check out all our events, because every single month there's something going on that you can plug into that's important to your business and especially to the supply chain teams that you have. So again, thanks to Michael for coming on today, and thanks to you for listening. Until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.